Hello, 7th graders. I am creating this video today to refresh your memory on how to do the I2 method. So taking a look at this example, I can see that I have a line graph here. So instead of working with a bar graph like we did earlier this year, I'm now working with a line graph. Over here, I can read my instructions. So the first step is always to identify. I need to write what I see for any changes, differences, or trends that I see. So remember, there are always three things I'm looking for when I'm doing WSs. They are the high, the low, and the trend. So looking at this graph, I can find the highest point on the end of this graph. So I'm going to draw an arrow here, and I'm going to write a WIS. This is the highest point. After the high, I'm going to look for the low. That's on the opposite end of this line graph. So I'm going to draw an arrow, and I'm going to do WIS. This is the lowest point. So I found the high, I found the low, and now I need to look at the overall trend. Remember, we always read trends from left to right. So if I'm looking at this line graph, and if this is my little finger person, like I showed you in class, I'm bopping along this line. What direction am I going up? I'm going up the line. So my trend is going to be increasing. WIS, the trend is increasing. So that's easy enough. I'm going to change my color real quick though, because I'm going to show you how to do a fourth something. So remember, I'm looking for a fourth something, like an outlier, maybe, to get to that A level. So pink is going to be my A level color. Looking at this graph, I'm noticing that from here to here, there seems to be something interesting going on. So this section of the line, I'm going to do a WIS, and I'm going to say, what is it about that section? Well, these 2 points have the largest difference. So see how when I go from point 1 to point 2, there's the biggest increase or the largest difference between those two. All right, so now that I've got my high, my low, and my trend on the front, I'm going to switch to a different color. I'm going to switch back to my purple, actually, and I'm going to move to page 2. So this is where you would flip your page over. We found the high, we found the low, we found the trend, and now I'm going to look at the back side. Notice now I have things here like a title, Labrador Retriever growth chart. I have an x-axis label. I now know that I'm looking at different months. And on this side, the y-axis label, I have weight in pounds. So right here, I need to first transfer over any lines or marks. So I had an arrow, whoopsies. I had an arrow pointing to the highest point. I had an arrow pointing to the lowest point. And I had an arrow demonstrating the overall trend. So I'm going to copy those over. We'll get to my fourth something in just a second. Now I'm going to change my pen color. I'm going to go to a blue instead for my whims, okay? So now I'm looking at this. So what it means, I'm now interpreting each of those what I see comments. So for this top one, I'm looking at my highest point. Now it's not just the highest point anymore. It's now that at month what? Month 12, I have the highest what? Highest weight at about 60 pounds. So I'm going to write a WIM, and I'm going to say at 12 months, a Labrador Retriever, I'm going to shorten it to lab. That's the kind of dog that Aurora is, by the way. A lab weighs the most at approximately 60 pounds. Can you see how I got that? I took my line, I followed it down to look at what month we were talking about, and then I followed it over to the y-axis to see what height we're looking at. Oh my gosh, I made a little error here because my line wasn't straight. That should say 65 pounds, shouldn't it? I'm going to make that change here real quick. So if I look at my line, it's actually going to be right here. That's my bad. My line was a little crooked. Okay, and now I'm going to move to my low. So first comes the high, then comes the low. So down here, I'm going to write a WIM for the low, and I'm going to take that dot, I'm going to follow it down, and I'm going to say that's at 2 months, right? So at 2 months. And what does this mean? It means that a Labrador Retriever, weighs the least, right? That's the lowest point, so it's the least weight, at about 8 pounds. Wow, they're tiny at 2 months. All right, and now the last thing that I need to do is I need to do my WIM for the trend, okay? My WIM for the trend. I'm going to erase some of these. Let's go to Object Eraser here. I'm going to erase some of this just so that it looks a little cleaner. And now I'm going to do my trend. So what does it mean that the line is increasing? Well, what it means is that as a Labrador Retriever gets older, its weight increases. Can you see that? So WIM, I'm going to say, as a lab puppy gets older, its weight increases. Kind of have to cross over my line there. So as the Labrador gets older, as its age in months increases, its weight also increases. All right, now I'm going to skip down. I'm going to find that pink color again, and we're going to talk about this guy right here, this section here. All right, so what I said on my first screen, my first side of my page, was that WIS, these 2 points have the largest difference. So down here, I'm going to ask myself, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that from 2 months to 3 months, a Labrador Retriever puppy gains the most amount of weight, right? So I'm going to write that. I'm going to write WIM. So I'm going to draw my arrow here, WIM, and I'm going to say from 2 to 3 months, a lab puppy gains the most weight, going from 8 to like 23 pounds. Wow. They really do gain a lot of weight in that first month or so after you own them. If you've ever had a puppy, you know this. Okay, and then now the very last thing that I need to do is this caption down here. Try and put a box there. So I'm going to switch my color to green now. And I start by looking at the title and the X and Y axis. But I always know I need to start with the Y axis first and then the X axis next. So this graph shows the Y axis label says the weight in pounds of a Labrador puppy. And then I'm going to bring my X-axis label in here. And I could say across different months, but I might make this a little more sophisticated and say, this graph shows the weight in pounds of a Labrador puppy as it gets older from 2 to 12 months. Because my first point on here is at 2 months, and my last point on this graph is at 12 months. And that, my friends, is a refresher on how to do the I2 method, specifically how to do the I2 method with a line graph, because this is the first time that we're really looking specifically at a line graph. So I'm going to slide back up. On the front side, I have my WISs, my high, my low, and my trend. WIS, this is the highest point. WIS, this is the lowest point. And WIS, the trend is increasing. Notice I'm not talking about weight or puppies or months or numbers or anything. I'm just finding the high, the low, the trend. When I flip my sheet over, that's when I get my titles and my axes labels back. And that's when I can actually start to explain the graph by talking about what each point means. If you have any questions, please come in and see me. Win time is a great time to get a little bit of extra help on the I2 method. Thanks.